All right, so I'll just introduce you. So we have with us today Suzanne Lindley from Say Yes to Hope, Beat Liver Tumors. She is more than 20 years a survivor of colon cancer, stage 4. And for those of you who don't know me, I am Catherine Workman with Home of Hope Cancer Wellness Center as an intern. So Suzanne, March is Colon Cancer Awareness Month. And you and I connected a number of years ago when my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, and you were a great source of comfort, hope, inspiration to us. So do you mind sharing with us about your diagnosis with colon cancer?
Well, I was diagnosed before there was even a colon cancer awareness month. That no one had a sea of blue back then. And when we found out that I had colon cancer, it was the kind of diagnosis where you wanted to hide in a closet and talk behind your hand and say colonoscopy and colon in whispers. So it has been an amazing journey to see, all of our advocacy work and the efforts that now bring us the sea of blue and the awareness for March.
Right.
I was diagnosed at 31, and Ronnie and I literally went from planning to have another baby to not planning at all. There was only one treatment available 22 years ago, and it had been around for 45 years at that time, and it's still one of the mainstays of treatment now.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really have a lot of hope. I had 3 liver tumors at the time of diagnosis. And if I were diagnosed today, they would probably do a resection, a little bit of follow-up chemo, and my story would be greatly changed. But back then, if you had liver tumors, it was pretty much a death sentence. And so we started that one chemo, and I was fortunate because research was really rampant at that time. And so as each new treatment was developed, I got to experience that. And at first it was in single agents, one chemo at a time. And then it was Dr. Saltz who came up with what is now called FOLFIRI. And back then we called it the triplet because it was 3 chemos together, 5-FU, leucovorin, and irinotecan. And so I, again, was very lucky. Each one of those treatments kind of bought me a little bit of time. And first diagnosis was in 1998, and we stretched those treatments. And then in 2004, my liver tumors were just really going out of control. And we kind of lost hope at that point and didn't really know what to do. We made a lot of changes in our life, preparing for me not to be here. And it was because of a friend that I had met online that we learned about a treatment that brought my liver tumors back under control, and then let me keep on with more treatment. And at the time, we had no idea whether that one treatment would buy me weeks, months, and it has, essentially was the turn back point where I was able to move forward and have years. So I think it's been pretty amazing to watch the research and just to see the hope and the advocacy. And, when you have a group of people come together like we do in the colon cancer world, it's really amazing to see the support and the inspiration that we get from each other. And I know Jim, during his battle was and still is a total inspiration.
Well, thank you for saying that. But I feel like when we started, you were one of the first people that offered us such an immense amount of support and immense amount of hope. You mentioned the treatment in 2004 that you came across. Was that Suzvirs?
That was Suzvirs.
Okay. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so I had been through all of the chemos that were available to date. We had been through 3 clinical trials, and there weren't any more options. So we were told at that point that we should call hospice, and we actually did call hospice. We planned my funeral, picked out a casket, and then Gordon Gwastow, who lived in Wisconsin, said, my doctor's doing this great new treatment, and I think it's going to save your life. And I ended up calling his doctor, and we talked for a little bit, and I was able to find out that it was done in Texas as well as Wisconsin. And my oncologist said, hey, I know about the treatment, but I really don't think it'll help you. And He said, but hey, what do you have to lose? Surspheres is an outpatient procedure. You go in, it's in 3 stages usually. Back when I had it, I actually had it in 2 stages, but they do the mapping, and they can either go through the artery in your groin, which is your femoral artery, or they can do a radial artery now in your arm, and they will snake the little catheter up into your liver. And the first procedure, they put in some dye to see where all of the radiation will go. And then if there's any vessels that are going to be going into your abdomen or into your lungs, they will coil those off with little coils. And then as long as everything is good to go, you're set up for the actual radiation procedure about a week or 2 later. And it's the same thing all over again. It's still just a little small nick through the skin. And then they'll put the little radioactive beads in, and it's called yttrium 90. And literally you go in the morning and you're out in the afternoon. And so it's a one-time procedure that treats all of the liver tumors, and then it leaves the rest of the liver tissue healthy.
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember hearing about that a number of years ago when you helped us consult in Chicago too. Are you currently on treatment, or did you have to have follow-up treatment after the Y90?
I did have follow-up treatment after the Y90, and went through numerous different chemotherapy cycles. I had RFA to my liver, RFA to the lungs. I've had CyberKnife to the lungs, and we've kind of cherry-picked along with systemic treatment. And then about 5 years ago, things kind of just, there were some spots in my lungs that have been inactive and have stayed inactive for those last 5 years. I am on Xeloda, and that's an oral chemotherapy pill. And with my regimen, I do 3 weeks on, 1 week off. And then we do, as long as things stay stable, we'll do 3 months on and 3 months off.
Okay.
And of course, if something else came up, we would start looking at, what to do next.
Sure. I mean, I just think it's amazing that you've lived this long with this type of cancer. I mean, it's nearly unheard of. And you've just constantly gone after what's next. And thankfully, so many things have worked for you. How are you, I guess, having gone through this for as long as you have, what do you think it's important for people who are newly diagnosed to know? What do you wish you had known back all those years ago?
Well, back when I was diagnosed, they didn't have multidisciplinary teams, but now there are. And I think that having a team is so vitally important, because you don't want just one discipline's information. You want to be able to have all of these eyes looking at you. Medical oncology, radiation oncology, surgical oncology, interventional radiology, and if you have liver tumors, hepatology. And so if all of those great minds are at a table and they're all looking at your particular case, then they all can weigh in and give you the best option that's possible. I think it's important that you create a care plan. And so if you have an algorithm, a little like a tree, and say, okay, this is where I'm at, and this is the treatment that I'm on. If my tumors grow, then this is what I want to do. If they shrink, this is what I want to do. And then that way you're always a little bit in charge, and you know what your next step is going to be. And sometimes when you're mired in the midst of this, it's really hard to look forward. You're just living in that very moment. And so being able to look forward and to plan and to know that there are options and that there is a next step, I think gives you a lot more control and a lot more security. Definitely having friends around you so that you can have someone else to, throw ideals off of and share experiences with. And I know how vitally important it was to be able to talk to other people and to get ideas and to learn from what they've done, and how to manage side effects, things like that.
Absolutely. I know for us, we were lucky that we were in a day and age when Jim was diagnosed that we could turn to Facebook and have support groups available to us, which allowed me to connect with you, and with many other survivors, people that were actively in treatment, people that weren't, to kind of know, hey, this is what the oncologist is saying. If you were in our position, or if you've been in our position, what did you do next? So I guess I'm grateful that we're living in a day and age where it's so easy to connect with people online, especially during times like right now with COVID, when we can't connect, face to face, but we can still find ways to reach out to one another and get that additional support, or gain that knowledge. I mean, you were able, my husband was sick, you were able to connect us to multiple other doctors to get opinions from on how to treat him. And I'm forever grateful for that. But I think you made a valid point. When you're first diagnosed, you don't know, you don't know how to navigate it all. And so using the resources available to you, the people that you can connect with, whether they be strangers or not, that have been there, that can help you navigate all those questions. And I know for us, one of the hard things was not, just kind of living in that, like, from scan to scan, is it going to shrink? If it shrinks, we stay on this. If it doesn't, if it's growing, we go to this. And like knowing what your plan is. Unfortunately, that becomes your new normal, but it also does give you back some control when it feels like the disease takes so much control from you.
And it does tend to do that. And now we're living in a very unprecedented times with pandemic.
Right, exactly. So you were 31 when you were diagnosed, and I know you had 2 daughters at that time, and now you have a 3rd daughter who joined your family. So you and Ronnie found a way to carry on life, make new additions to your family, and experience more of the world in those 20 years since your diagnosis. Can you tell us how that has been? And I mean, I just think it's amazing, because life could have just stopped and stayed still at that point, right?
Yeah, it's really kind of crazy, because I was a stay-at-home mom, and I absolutely loved just, being a mom was all I'd ever wanted, and I loved absolutely doing that. My kids were 8 and 11 when I was diagnosed, and they go off to school, and I would sit at home and watch Oprah and read Harlequin romance, and that was pretty much my happy days. I had dinner on the table when Ronnie got home, and had a perfectly cleaned house, and just totally changed, because we started making the most of every minute, and not knowing whether you're gonna, and none of us know whether we're gonna see the next day.
Right.
But when you have it staring in the face, you really try to make the muchness that more much. And we, things, I would have never woken my kids up at midnight and gone for a horseback ride. And we would wake them up on a night with a full moon and go roast marshmallows under the full moon on horseback. We would stop in the middle of the highway and take pictures in the bluebonnets. And before cancer, I would have been, oh my gosh, what if, that's embarrassing if somebody sees you, pulling over on the side of the road. So things changed a lot in the family closeness and the things that I was willing to do to make those memories. And then with Fight CRC, advocacy became very important. And I cannot say enough about Nancy Roach and Fight CRC and all the people who have followed her, because I think that the screening guidelines and Cover Your Butt and the campaigns that they brought that created awareness for colon cancer were life-changing and life-saving for so many. And so I was lucky to start out with them. And then, the liver tumors and not knowing what my options were, I was sitting around not around kitchen tables, but talking on the phone with Wastow and Sherry Simmons and a couple of other people. And we were talking about, you know, these organizations are great, but they don't really focus on liver tumors. And that was what we were all faced with at the time.
Sure.
And we had felt very isolated and very alone. And Nancy at Fight CRC said, you know, if you're going to start something new, don't reinvent the wheel. You've got to do something totally different. And so that's how Yes came about. I was at a Live Strong meeting and they asked us to create a personal action plan. And Gordon and I had kind of already started the ball rolling. We knew we wanted to have support for those of us who are facing liver tumors. And so it started out with, you know, just phone calls, and we had a listserv back then. Facebook, you know, hadn't been invented. So we were just doing emails back and forth. And that's how Yes really came about. And it was just, and it still is, to help anyone who is affected by liver tumors.
Yes, and I think that's a valid point. It's, you know, it's not just colon cancer that metastasizes to your liver. You can have liver cancer that originates in your liver and other cancers that metastasize to your liver. So Say Yes to Hope Beat Liver Tumors is your organization, and it really does provide support and resources to anybody with a cancer that has traveled to their liver. Can you tell us exactly like what your mission is and what your organization does for patients?
So we provide information, resources, and support to anyone who is affected by tumors that have spread to the liver or have started in the liver. And it can be breast, colon, kidney, pancreatic, primary liver cancer. And if someone calls, we have a toll-free survivor line. Someone can call the survivor line and we can match them to other resources where they can, if let's just say the doctor said there's no more options for them, we can match them with a team of physicians that can take a look and say, we concur, or, you know, these are things that we might think are going to be possible. And, you know, even when there are no medical options left, there are still options for making things comfortable and making memories and making, you know, making the most of every minute. We have a friends.
Oh, you're muted. Sorry, can you back up just a little bit with what you were saying?
Can you still hear me?
A little bit louder. Let's see. That's better. Yes, that's better.
Okay.
Perfect.
So we have a Friends for the Journey program, and it matches patient to patient, caregiver to caregiver, and it is just a way that you know you're not alone. So if someone calls our survivor line and says, I'm looking at having radio frequency ablation, or looking at microwave ablation, or surf spheres, and I'd like to talk to someone else who's had that procedure, we can match them with someone else who has been through it. Also, you know, any chemotherapies, if they're having a certain side effect, then we can match them with someone who's had that side effect and kind of work through it together so that you feel more supported and not so isolated.
Wow, that's amazing. I think that's so valuable for people to have. I think that's great. I don't even think I realized that that was part of your organization's mission as well. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Never give up. Always make sure that you have a second opinion, and always hold on to hope.
Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I know our family benefited from you, from knowing you as a friend, and from the resources.
And likewise, your family has changed our family's life too.
Oh, that's so sweet. Hopefully one of these days we can reconnect in a warm environment like California again. But you've just been a great source of hope, and I know you are for a lot of patients and caregivers out there in the cancer community, and I appreciate your time so much. So I really appreciate your time and doing this with us today.
All
So
right. I don't know if you can hear me or not. It says it's muted on my end, but
I can hear you.
okay. Well, it's great to see you, and thank you for including me.
Oh, yes, my pleasure. Give the family my best. Thank you for
All
everything,
right.
Suzanne.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.